Hey, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, we're going to answer the question, how long should you rest in between sets to help maximize your muscle growth? So in this video, I'm going to give you my top 3 principles to ensure you're optimizing your rest to promote maximal muscle growth. Let's dive in now. You're driving me crazy. All right, so I was originally 159 pounds. For those of you who are kind of laughing and thinking like, this guy's not that big, I was 159 pounds at 6 foot 2 inches. I shot up to 215 pounds. Then I went back down to 185 pounds with less than 12% body fat, which is where I reside year long. Now, the most valuable piece of advice that I can give to you, which I'm going to explain because it's not going to be totally clear at first, but once I explain it, I know you're going to understand. First principle, the most important principle that we have is I need you to rest long enough. So what does that mean? Okay, let's assume that you're bench pressing and you get up to your first work set and you bench press 185 pounds for 10 reps. All right, now what you need to do to maximize your muscle growth is ensure that, and let's assume that you bench press 185 pounds for 10 reps. And let's say you had maybe 1 more rep in you, maybe maximally 2 if you really pushed it, okay? So how long should you rest for? You just want to rest long enough so that you can repeat that performance. And let's assume, for all intents and purposes, that this bench press is your first exercise of the day. I know people are gonna hit me with comments. What if I already did flies and some standing cable presses? Okay, first exercise of the day here. It's bench press. You did 185 pounds for 10 reps on the first set. How long should you rest? You just want to rest long enough so that you can essentially duplicate that performance. Now, for some of you, let's say you're a big, giant guy and you haven't started lifting, you may not need to rest very long, all right? It might mean as little as 2 minutes. Maybe for some of you who are really big, a minute and a half. For others, it may be up to 4 or 5 minutes before you can fully recover to repeat that performance. But the idea is this, it's that you don't really need to rest longer than you need to. You could, however, though, okay? So before we get lost in the woods here, you just want to find out what that sweet spot is for you. And typically when you are just, let's say your sweet spot is like, okay, I rested 3 minutes and I could hit 10 reps and it felt about the same. There you go. 3 minutes is it. But let's say you rested 2.5 minutes. You're like, oh, getting 10 reps was a total grind. Well, then you are not completely recovered, because this is the key for muscle growth. This is principle number 2, all right? When you are sacrificing your performance for rest, you are leaving muscle growth on the table. What that means is that when I rest too short, when I don't rest enough, I am leaving gains on the table. Okay. Whereas if you rested long enough and you'd be able to essentially repeat your performance, maybe it'll be even better, then you are maximizing your muscle growth. Now, does that mean that we need to wait 10 minutes, 15 minutes? Now, for some of you, you actually could. And as long as you could repeat your performance, you are fine then. Okay. Now, I don't know why you'd want to wait 10, 15 minutes, but even if you did, that's great. Now, what if you waited 45 minutes? You're going to lose your warm-up effect probably, assuming you had a warm-up, right? And at some point in your lifting career, you will need a warm-up. Typically, for most, there's some genetic freaks out there and just, benching 365 first shot. But I mean, if you're like 99.9% of us, you're going to need a warm-up. Then there's going to be a rest period, which is going to be ideal for you. And so here's the good news. This is principle number 3. You can be safe by adding on a little bit extra rest time by adding on what you think you could fully recover them, and maybe adding on 30 seconds to a minute. So let's say you're like, okay, I'm going to go 3.5 minutes. I think that's the minimum amount of time I would need to rest. Maybe you add on 30 seconds to that. Maybe you add on a minute to that, up to like 4 minutes, 30 seconds. And typically you're going to be able to repeat your performance. So as long as you are recovering sufficiently, you are going to maximize your performance, which will then maximize your muscle growth. I know some people are going to ask, like, what if I'm doing stuff in between? What if I'm doing supersetting, like with squats? Well, then you might need to rest a little bit more. However, the principle still is the same. You have to consider, like with a superset, let's say you're doing bench press and squat. Well, then let's say you have bench press. Right after you finish your bench press, you rest 2 minutes. Then you go back to your squat, you rest 2 minutes. You go back to your bench press, rest 2 minutes. You go back to your squat, you rest 2 minutes. So if you can maintain your performance, then that is a good solid rest period for you. You're probably maximizing your muscle growth. However, if you find you start to decrease performance, chances are you need to rest more. And it might mean maybe a little bit more after your bench press or a little bit more after your squat. Maybe it's just one of them. Maybe it's just both, right? So while we're focusing on one exercise, you have to consider, if you're doing supersetting, how to manage your rest periods outside of that. But again, the idea is this: just rest enough. And if you go a little bit overboard, it's not a big deal. You don't want to be resting 20 minutes talking to people in the gym and it's like, oh, I did 3 sets and it's 60 minutes later. If that's all you've done in the gym, you're probably talking too much and you need to focus on your training. So how long are your rest intervals? Are you getting enough rest? If you have any questions or comments, let me know. Thanks for watching.
You're driving me crazy.